Schindler's List?
Yes. Hello, Austin. How are you?
I hate you.
We've been watching Christmas movies, and really the movie that I wanted to get to after this whole thing started is this movie. We're today going to watch It's a Wonderful Life. Have you heard of It's a Wonderful Life?
Yes.
Have you seen It's a Wonderful Life?
No.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about this movie, and this is probably going to be the most I've ever said in one of these. This film was directed by a man named Frank Capra. Frank Capra is one of the legendary directors of the early 20th century, or mid-20th century. Capra directed It Happened One Night, You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, of course, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, just a very famous director. This film was a bit of a passion project for Frank Capra. This was one of his first films he made after the end of the Second World War. He had been making propaganda films for the Army, for the Navy, for the U.S. government, and he came back, he opened his own studio, and he made It's a Wonderful Life. And the sad thing is this movie was a flop. This movie opened in December of 1946. It was originally slated for release in 1947, January, but they moved it up a little bit. It did see a wide release in 1947, but it just didn't do well because this movie deals with some pretty dark themes about economic problems, about the value of a person's life. And in 1946, after the Depression, after the war, American audiences just didn't want to see it. And it wasn't until a quirk of copyright law that in 1974 this fell into the public domain and television stations started to put this on the air. And in the 1970s, dealing with the end of the Vietnam War, Watergate, economic crisis, the gas crisis, it resonated with American audiences. And people actually got to both commiserate and find the hope in life with Geroge Bailey, the main character of this film. Geroge Bailey is played by Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart, one of the greatest actors of all time. One of my favorite actors. He's actually in what I think is the best movie of all time, Vertigo. But I think that this is the best performance Jimmy Stewart's ever given in any film in this movie. And the sad thing is the only movie I think you've ever seen Jimmy or heard Jimmy Stewart in is the animated film An American Tail, Fievel Goes West. Jimmy Stewart played Wiley Burp, a cowboy dog, in his last role, sadly. Much like the great Orson Welles, his last role was a voice in an animated cartoon, because I'm pretty sure Orson Welles' last role was as Unicron in the Transformers movie. But this, in my opinion, is Jimmy Stewart's best performance. This movie is, I think, a must-watch for anybody at Christmas time, and I really think you're going to like it. After hearing all that, do you care at all about this movie?
I didn't listen to a thing you said.
What you need to know is that this is a movie that was not appreciated when it first came out. And years later, people actually saw what was trying to be put on film here. And this is a story that is revered at Christmas time because it really is an assessment of the value of a human life. That things can always be worse, and it really, today we're dealing with mental health crises and stuff. This movie is really kind of an assessment and a beautiful examination of the human soul, the human spirit. So I love this movie, and it, bar none, is the best movie that I've ever forced you to watch. So we're going to watch It's a Wonderful Life. Are you excited?
What does bar none mean?
It's a miracle. Who's gonna come, Daddy? Who, Daddy? Come in, Uncle Billy. Everybody in here.
George, you better come on. You've never seen anything like it. Anything like it. Isn't it wonderful? So many friends. Mary did it, George. Mary did it. She told some people you were in trouble with it. They scattered all over town collecting money. Didn't ask any question. Just said, George in trouble. Tell me you
What is
never
this?
saw anything like it. Spread like fair.
Another run on the bank? Here, George. Merry Christmas.
Now, don't push. There we are. The line forms on the right. Clark, coming, George. Now, don't hurry. God bless you. Oh, Mr. Martini. Here's Martini. Step right up there. I busted the jukebox, too.
George, I changed my mind.
But this was if ever I get a husband. Hey, all right, George, I got the faculty all wrapped around a bit. Here's some beautiful.
I wouldn't have a roof over my head if it wasn't for you, George.
Just a minute, just a minute. Quiet, everybody. Quiet. Now get this. It's from London.
Oh.
Mr. Gower cabled you need cash. Stop. My office instructed to advance you up to $25,000. Stop. Hee-haw and Merry Christmas, Sam Wainwright.
Mr. Martini, how about some wine?
The fool flew all the way up here in a blizzard.
Harry, how about your Banford in New York?
Oh, I left right in the middle of it. As soon as I got Mary's telegram. Good idea, Ernie. A toast. To my big brother, George, the richest man in town. That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right.
Attaboy, Clarence.
All right, Austin, I made you watch It's a Wonderful Life. What did you think?
It was good.
So you actually, there were points in this film that you actually laughed and enjoyed it. I know you're not a big fan of older films, but you did enjoy yourself a little bit.
Yeah, it was fine.
Were you moved at all by the story of one man's ability to affect the world around him? George Bailey gave up everything in his life that he wanted to do. He didn't, travel the world. He didn't become rich and famous. He sacrificed at every turn to help the people of Bedford Falls, to help his family, to allow his brother to take the job with his brother's fiance's father. George just stayed in the town that he didn't want to stay in, but in the end, as his brother said, he was the richest man he knew. So did it touch you at all? Did you feel the emotional?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty emotional, but I don't think he really sacrificed a whole lot.
Well, he didn't get... Well, I think that's kind of the point of the movie, is George feels like he's given up everything he wanted to do. And he feels like he's getting nothing from it. And in the end, Clarence shows him that he was truly rich because he had all of these friends.
Yeah, I get that. Like, that makes sense. But, like, it wasn't the... It was like... Like, imagine if you didn't go to Virginia. Like, that's literally it.
Well, but again, this is imagining if George wasn't born. His brother's dead. Old Mr. Gower poisoned somebody and went to prison.
They just showed you what... They showed you the extremes.
Yeah, but I think everybody's lives, they affect the people around them. Imagine... Everybody needs to take a time and imagine what would have happened if they would have never been born. Austin, if I would have never been born, you wouldn't have seen this movie.
That's not true.
Are you sure?
Yes. You're saying that there's no possible chance of me never seeing this movie because you were not born, which is not true.
Would you have watched this movie without me?
Do you know?
Would you have?
Maybe I would have been.
Are you lying? Because I know you're lying.
I'm not lying.
You're
I
lying.
could have been watching this movie on TV someday, just because you were not born.
You
know?
don't have TV.
It's a small coincidence kind of thing.
But in the end, you enjoyed this movie. You liked it.
Yeah, it was really good.
Do you hear that, Austin? They say every time a bell rings, an angel who just made somebody like a movie gets its wings.